Welcome to the Japan Business Show. My name is Eric Ahona, and today we're talking with Marieluise Mammitzsch. Marieluise is a PR spokesperson for Lexus in Germany. Marieluise, thank you so much for making it to the interview today.
Thank you for having me.
Marieluise, so tell us a bit about your background. Where did you grow up, your educational background, and also what has led you to work in PR in Lexus, Germany?
I'm half German, half Japanese. I was born in Germany, grew up in Japan. And after I finished my high school studies, I went to Australia to study international business. And after I finished my degree, I went back to Japan and started an internship at a German pharmaceutical company in Osaka, which is actually where we met in 2003. And after that, I moved to Germany. And at a German-Japanese get-together, I met a Japanese engineer who introduced me to Toyota, and I learned about Toyota's engagement in Formula One. And that is how I applied for a job there. And that's how I started to work in motorsports and ended up working 10 years in motorsports before I came back to Germany to work for Toyota road cars.
Mm-hmm. So you have a lot of international experience, but allow me to take it step by step. So I'm really interested in the experience that you've made in your internship in Japan, in Osaka, at the pharma company where we also met. What was your experience in terms of the challenges and the opportunities that you've seen in working in a Japanese business environment, especially since you also have Japanese?
Well, it was a very personal challenge for me because even though I grew up in Japan, I was always living in a bubble, more or less, because I went to a German school and then international school. So it wasn't really the real thing. So having had this opportunity to work as an intern in Japan, allowed me to, with a safety net, learn about Japanese business and how work is being done in Japan. And I was lucky enough to have really good colleagues around me who took care of me and gave me enough room and time to learn and observe. And that really was a great learning experience.
Mm-hmm. And have you felt that when you were in the Japanese environment that people expected you to be Japanese, or did they know that you were actually more European than Japanese? Or how did you feel welcomed, or let's say integrated into the team? Because I assume you were working with Japanese only, or you had a few foreigners around you as well?
No, actually, it was a team of only Japanese colleagues. But I suppose with looking like a Japanese but having a German name, people would immediately know that I was a bit different. So I suppose they didn't expect me to be Japanese. So I suppose that helped me in a way. But as I said, it was I was lucky enough to be an intern to just take it one step at a time. I was able to ask questions, make my small mistakes without creating major problems for the company. So that was really good.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and let's take a step forward into your career path. So you were mentioning after going to Germany, you met a Japanese engineer of Toyota Motorsports, and that's how you started to work also for that company. How was your start for Toyota Motorsports compared to your experience in the Japanese environment of a German company, the German pharma company in Japan, and now moving into a Japanese company in Germany? How was the shift there? Was the environment comparable? Was it completely different? Was it more Japanese, less Japanese?
Interesting question, because yes, it was a Japanese company, but the team was based in Cologne. The people around me were from all over the world. Very international team. Parent company being Japanese. There were certain, ways of doing business that were more Japanese focus based. So it was different, but again, very good learning curve there. Also the environment itself, motorsport being a very dynamic environment, which makes it also very unique. So different worlds, but great opportunities.
And did you have the feeling that you could utilize your knowledge of Japanese when you were working for Toyota Motorsports, or was it so international that basically communication in Japanese or with Japanese headquarters was not really necessary in your position?
No, it definitely helped me, because in my position, I did have direct contact to my colleagues in Japan. And so in preparation for a Grand Prix weekend, we would communicate in advance. And having worked in a Japanese environment, I was able to understand their needs a bit better. I wouldn't say I was an expert, having had an internship only for 6 months, but it definitely gave me better understanding and knowledge of how to, organize certain things or do certain things, prepare them in a way that, they expected.
Mm-hmm. And since it was Toyota Motorsports and the Formula One, tell us a bit about what your experience was working in that exciting environment, because I always associate the Formula One as the pinnacle of team building, because not only the actual, do you call them engineers at the pit stop that have to change the tires, refuel, make adjustments and so on, but also the people behind the scenes, the people that do the analytics and so on. They really have to work well together, and it's, I think, maybe since it's such a dynamic environment and very fast paced, like every millisecond counts. So everything has to be in place. Everything needs to be kind of like an unspoken rule that everybody is on the same page. So for teams, I think it's a lot of teams look to the Formula One to see how can we improve our team working even better together. So tell us a bit about that environment and what your experience was in that environment.
So describing it as a very dynamic environment is spot on, I would say. It's very unique because you are dictated by the calendar, and that says every second week there's a Grand Prix and you work towards this big event. And it's all the details that make up the end result. So the attention to detail, and our former team manager used to say, check, check, check. So don't just double check, check again. Because you really have to give 100% every second. So that was, it was a very new experience also for me, having come from corporate environment and being, it was my first job really, to be in such a dynamic environment.
Mm-hmm. And so I think at the time that you joined, did Toyota, were they recently entering the Formula One? I think it was pretty recent, right?
Yeah, they had entered and it was their 3rd year, I think. Mm-hmm. So it was, still at the beginning.
Was there any thing that you saw that was very specific to Toyota being kind of fresh in this Formula One game compared to other participants, or I assume the team was fairly new. Was there anything that you saw that was completely different from other teams that had already worked together?
Honestly, I wouldn't be able to tell, because when I entered and started with the team, everything seemed already the way it should be. So yeah, now in hindsight, I wouldn't dare to say that maybe there were still some things that made it look like it was still a new entrant. I would say that yeah, once you enter motorsport at such a level, like from the start, you are right there, you know, like these are the best teams, the best mechanics, the best engineers, the drivers. And yeah, and at the time when I joined, as I said, they were already active for a couple of years. So
and so you stayed in the Formula One, but you switched from a Japanese company, Toyota Motorsports, to an Italian company. And I'm curious how that shift was. If there was some kind of culture shock, because usually for all the people watching or listening, from a Japanese company to an Italian company, it seems pretty kind of the polar opposite in terms of culture, in terms of communication and so on. Was that the case, or was it pretty similar?
I would say in terms of work ethic, it was the same. But obviously, yeah, moving from a very international team based in Cologne to a smaller city in Italy, that in itself is quite a difference. And the team was, I would say, 90% Italian. So that does make a difference, but I enjoyed it because I always wanted to go live in Italy, speak Italian, and enjoy this, this Italian life. So I didn't really see it as a challenge. I just, enjoyed it and tried to learn as much as possible.
And so what was your next step? What has finally led you to work for Lexus back in Cologne, in not motorsports, but in for the brand, for a Toyota brand, Lexus, in I don't know if I can say regular automotive, but what has led you to that position?
It was a very, lucky coincidence that after 10 years of motorsports, I heard of the opportunity to work as the PR for Lexus back in Cologne, and I went for it. And even though I have to say the beginnings were rather difficult.
Because you were used to because you were used to all the traveling and the excitement at the dynamic environment, I guess, and
and it was just complete change in everything. But now I can definitely say I'm very happy that I made that change, and now it's almost 8 years that I've been living in Cologne and working here. So yeah,
congratulations.
Thank you.
Right. So what would you say is your unique skill that has led you to become successful, or become the successful PR spokesperson that you are right now?
I would say that my language skills have definitely helped me, but I would like to think that my open-mindedness and hard-working ethic helped me to be where I am now.
Is that something that you have learned from like very young, at a young age, from your parents, or where did you get that work ethic from? Or was it something that you've acquired along the way during your career? Or where would you say you've picked up on that?
I've probably picked up on that skill during high school, which was a very tough time, having switched from a German school to an international school when I was 13 years old. And that was a time when I just had to study like long hours. Weekdays was like past midnight was normal. Working, studying on the weekends was normal. So yeah, I think I took up the straight back in high school.
Wow, that's interesting. So was it, although it sounds a bit like a Japanese school, when you think about Japanese schools in terms of entry exams for university and so on, that they really have like those cram schools after the high school where they have to go to study for preparation of the entrance exams to go to like the so-called Ivy or the best universities in Japan. You really have to study very hard and past midnight, as you mentioned. But that wasn't I mean, was it something like that, or how come the demands were so high in an international school in Japan?
I don't know. I think the school had very high standards, and the people around me were all hard workers. It was actually cool to have straight A's in your subjects. So I suppose, yeah, it was a good thing, and that just kind of made me also do my work and study because I didn't want to be left behind.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, if it is cool to have good grades, then of course, if that's something that your community or your tribe, when you're a teenager, is accepting, then you'll do everything to fit in. I can understand. And that's actually a good thing. That's absolutely right. So, circling back to your work experience in general a little bit, when you think about something that is very unique to Japanese business culture compared to, let's say, German business culture, what do you think is very unique where you say, okay, this is something that the Japanese do in terms of business meetings, in terms of systems, in terms of business processes? Is there something that comes to mind?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of work being done in the background when working with Japanese, um, more so than in German working culture. So you would probably not go into a meeting and I don't know, expect to discuss a project, to discuss decisions and everything. You would take time to talk to the individuals, beforehand, just making sure, everyone is on board, and then use a meeting to formalize that. And that is probably the most obvious difference that comes to mind.
Yes, in terms of what my experience is, that Japanese never use a meeting to make decisions, only to deliver a message that has been already agreed on in like the whole department or sometimes even the whole company beforehand. So you deliver the message, and then when the usually Western business partners saying, all right, that sounds good, but can we do this, this, and this like this as well? And then the Japanese counterpart will say, we will check, which means they cannot make a decision and they will not make a decision in the meeting. They will go back, they will find a consensus, and then they will get back and deliver the message again. So this is, I think that's a very good point that you're bringing up, that most Westerners kind of start to be frustrated with, usually, especially when they go to Japan. Imagine you go on a business trip to Japan, you think, all right, I'm going to get there, I'm going to get that deal done, and then I can go home and say, all right, I got the deal, everything's good. And then you get there and then you say, all right, okay, can we sign this? Ah, yes, let us check. And then it's like you kind of fall back on your chair and it's like, what does that mean, So that's something that I think it's really good that you mentioned, that I think is really useful to understand. So when you look also at the differences between Japanese and German business culture, would you say that it is easier to start working with a Japanese company, or is it easier in the beginning to start working with a German company in terms of getting to know, doing the introduction to actually find a business relationship?
Well, I think both have their advantages probably, but if you're young and you start with a Japanese company, you're probably more open and willing to learn, and therefore you have that advantage. But yeah, working for a German company, I don't know. I think in the end, it all comes down to, you know, being open-minded and being willing to learn about the other culture and to just take some time to understand the other party.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's very direct, and there's a lot of truth in that. I fully agree. Now, talking about open-mindedness, when you look back over the past 5 years, what is a habit, a belief, or a routine that you've adapted to your life that you have most benefited from?
Well, as corny as it sounds, to always see the positive in everything that you do. When you think, oh, that's going to be a boring meeting, I try to think, oh, maybe, you know, I'll learn something about this person who is also in it, or if you know it's going to be a very long evening event, I try to, I don't know, focus on the positives or the bright sides of things, and that seriously has always helped me, because obviously it's not all going to be, you know, happy days and a walk in the park. So yeah, I think just forcing yourself to always believe there will be something good in whatever you do.
It can't rain all the time. That's
Yes.
true. Well, the rain will stop at some point. Do you also practice some kind of mindfulness activity or some meditation?
I would like to, but I haven't quite implemented it in my daily life.
What about Japanese traditions? Since you're half Japanese, do you still practice any Japanese traditions? I mean, something like, I don't know, ikebana or some, because Japanese traditions, I think they're very focused on perfecting the here and now. So they have kind of a meditative impact on you while practicing them, from my opinion.
Yeah, that's a good point. I wouldn't say I practice any specific Japanese traditions, but I do like, I have practiced Japanese tea ceremony when I was in high school. And yeah, there is a philosophy of ichigo ichie, which means that you value every encounter and every moment that you share with with your guest or with another person. And I kind of take it to I translate it into my own life as also making sure to implement small beautiful moments in my day-to-day activities.
That's great. And talking a bit about the advice that you would give companies that want to do business with Japanese partners or other Japanese companies, is there anything that you would say, this is something that you could use to improve your business relationship with a Japanese company?
I think, as we already mentioned, having an open mind and a willingness to learn and to be curious and to just maybe be prepared that you will learn something new, or you will be surprised of how people do business. You know, it's there are different ways, and maybe just to be aware or to understand it's going to be different, and that's not bad or that's not better, but yeah, to just keep that in mind, and obviously to make sure that you take some time to I don't know, study, get to know the other culture. Preparation always yeah, goes a long way.
Thank you. Before I let you go, I know that you have a hobby and you love food, you love preparing food, and that you have an Instagram account where you actually show a lot of the food that you're preparing, or maybe you're sharing food that you like. What is your Instagram name? So if people want to connect with you, if you want to share, of course, only if you want to share. So if people want to connect with you, or if they want to see what your hobby is about, where can they connect with you?
Oh, I'm there with my regular name, so yeah, that's how you can find me.
All right. Wonderful. So people can check out the video description to know how the name is spelled, because usually you might not get it 100%.
Yes.
Awesome. Great. Marieluise, thank you so much for your time today. That was a really fun interview, and thank you for sharing your experiences and impressions with us. And this was the Japan Business Show. Thank you again, and see you all next time.
Thank you.